I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Thursday, September the 1st, 2016. IDF soldiers came under attack this morning while standing guard at Joseph's tomb in Nablus in the West Bank. The troops were protecting several busloads of Jewish worshippers who had come to the site to pray when they were hit by a hail of Molotov cocktails, burning tires, and rocks. The soldiers used riot dispersal methods to calm the situation. One IDF soldier was injured in the incident as a result of gunfire. It was unclear what the source of the live fire was. He was listed in stable condition at Rambam Hospital. A U.S. appeals court yesterday dismissed a multi-million-dollar ruling made against the Palestinian Authority and PLO for their liability in terror attacks that took place in Israel. The ruling was in a lawsuit brought against the PA and PLO on behalf of families of American victims killed or wounded in those attacks in Israel that took place in the early 2000s. Back in February of 2015, a court found that the PLO and PA were liable for over $200 million, which was then tripled under the U.S. Anti-Terrorism Act to $655.5 million. The act lets American victims of international terrorism sue in U.S. courts. However, in a 3-0 vote yesterday, the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan said that a lower court judge had been mistaken in concluding that he had jurisdiction over the case, and they ordered that the civil lawsuit, which began in January of 2004, be dismissed, saying that the terror attacks had not been specifically aimed at Americans, and therefore the U.S. did not have jurisdiction. Judge John Kodal wrote in his ruling that the federal courts cannot exercise jurisdiction in a civil case beyond the limits prescribed by the Due Process Clause of the Constitution, no matter how horrendous the underlying attacks or morally compelling the plaintiff's claims. One of the attorneys for the families who brought the suit, Kent Yalowitz, called the appeals court decision cruel. He said the U.S. State Department and Congress should intervene to make sure that the families are compensated. Yalowitz said the very terrorists who prompted the law, referring to the U.S. Anti-Terrorism Act, have now hidden behind the U.S. Constitution to avoid responsibility for their crimes. Last night, Israel returned the body of Palestinian terrorist Baha Al-Yan to his family for burial. Al-Yan, together with Palestinian terrorist Bilal Ghanem, attacked a bus in Jerusalem last October, killing 3 Israelis. Al-Yan was shot and killed by a security guard during the attack, and his body has been held by Israel. It was returned last night after Al-Yan's family agreed to certain terms for his funeral, including limiting the number of attendants, as funerals for Palestinian terrorists often turn into demonstrations of incitement to more terror. Israel's new ambassador to Egypt presented his credentials to the country's president yesterday morning. David Govrin was welcomed in Cairo with an Egyptian military band playing Hatikva, Israel's national anthem. He presented his letter of credence to President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The 53-year-old Govrin is Israel's 13th ambassador to Egypt. He replaces Chaim Koren, who served in the post for the past 2 years. Govrin was one of 8 new envoys welcomed in Cairo yesterday. And as Turkey and Israel look to exchange ambassadors in the very near future, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with an Israeli diplomatic official this week for the first time in 2 years. Erdogan was seen shaking hands with Shani Cooper, who is the diplomatic attaché to the Israeli mission in Ankara, during a reception with diplomats to mark Turkey's Victory Day, its Independence Day. The photo of Erdogan and Cooper was released to the press by the Office of the Turkish Presidency in what appears to be yet another sign of improved relations. Israeli pilots joined American airmen as well as pilots from Pakistan and the United Arab Emirates in a joint military exercise in the Nevada desert. The Red Flag exercise was held at Nellis Air Force Base for the last 2 weeks. It is considered the premier air-to-air combat training exercise for the U.S. military. An Israeli communications satellite was destroyed today during a test launch at Cape Canaveral. The incident took place during a routine rocket test being held before a launch scheduled for Saturday of the unmanned Falcon 9 rocket. NASA said that a blast occurred just around 9 this morning at the Air Force Station in Florida next to the Kennedy Space Center, caused by an anomaly during a static fire test, which destroyed the rocket and the payload, a $200 million Amos 6 satellite operated by Israeli firm Spacecom. There were no injuries. And taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Thursday, September the 1st. At 7:30, historian, author, and Emmy Award-winning writer and presenter of the documentary series The Story of the Jews, Simon Schama, accepts the American Jewish Historical Society's Emma Lazarus Statue of Liberty Award. At 8 o'clock, Stephen Boehm, who is director of the Kopelman Center at the American Jewish Committee, talks about the increasingly tenuous relationship between American Jews and the State of Israel. At 9, Mark Golub sits down with Israeli singer Ron Eliran on L'chaim, and at 10, the Bronx Jewish Historical Initiative's Jewish Hall of Fame induction ceremony at the Bronx Museum of the Arts in New York City. And coming up right after this newscast tonight, Mark Golub speaks with Nathan Gutman of the Jewish Forward on the upcoming elections. And that's the JBS News Update for Thursday, September the 1st, 2016. I'm Teisha Bader. I will be back with the news on Tuesday, wishing you a safe and enjoyable holiday weekend and an early Shabbat Shalom.